Now, a lot has been made about this 2025 rookie tight end class, probably mostly because we have two guys that are most likely going to be drafted in the first round of the NFL draft, and then thus also be drafted in the first round of rookie drafts. Then we also have an interesting tight end 3, another couple names that are very interesting, tight end 4, tight end 5, or dart throw guys that you can get later in your rookie drafts. And you guys have also been loving my marker system that I introduced, or I should say, more decently explained in previous videos over the past couple of weeks for the running backs and the wide receiver positions, both pre and post NFL Combine. And up to this point, I have not had a marker system for the quarterback or for the tight end position. But over the past few days, I have been working up a marker system for the tight end position. And generally, the only reason why I didn't want to up to this point was because there are just so few tight ends that actually make a difference for fantasy football. And really, it just comes down to, are they athletic and were they drafted high enough? That was basically my whole entire evaluation for rookie tight ends coming into this video. But I do have an actual concrete marker system that is very similar to the wide receiver position because I want these tight ends to be receivers at the NFL level. That is what we care about for fantasy football, and whether or not they're a good blocker doesn't necessarily indicate if they are actually going to be good for fantasy football or not. So let's take a look at the marker system that I have created for the tight end position and how that impacts the 2025 rookie tight end class. So if we bounce over to my spreadsheet here, this is going to look very, very similar to everything that you've already seen at the running back and the wide receiver positions. It's basically all the same kind of layout, same kind of color schemes for the cells in terms of what's good, what's not so good, what am I missing, all that kind of stuff. Of course, column N, exact same column that we've been looking at. That is the marker column where I'm looking at 14 baselines for the tight end position in terms of production and athleticism is what I'm looking at for my marker system. And then once again, I have a PFF marker system in here from Pro Football Metrics, like yards per route run, targets per route run, first down per route run, yards after the catch, all that kind of stuff, looking at best and career season numbers for all of those metrics. And then a final adjusted marker system where I basically take the final markers and then adjust once again for draft capital at the end of it, either positively or negatively, depending on what day or what round you were drafted in. So this actually ended up being just like on my first go around, basically more or less copying the wide receiver marker system, but just changing what the actual baselines are because tight ends aren't going to be as productive as wide receivers. So example one, I'm looking at breakout year. That's breakout year for wide receivers. I'm looking at thresholds of 20% dominator ratings and 30% dominator ratings for the wide receiver position. Here, I'm looking at 15% dominator rating and 20% dominator rating are like my two, a lower level baseline and then a higher level baseline. For the tight end position, I found that to be at 15% and 20% as opposed to 20 and 30 for the wide receiver position. Some of the other metrics are basically, just the same, just lower, like yards per team pass attempt. I'm looking for 1.5 yards per team pass attempt in their final season, 1.75 in their best season. Fantasy points per game is a little bit lower. I think it's like 11 or 12 points per game instead of like 20 like it was for wide receivers, all that kind of stuff. The one new one that I did add because it does seem to be indicative is career yards per reception. For the tight end position, that one I'm looking for at least 13 yards per reception. That shows the ability to be a more downfield threat rather than just some guy that is, maybe they're helping to move the chains, but they're not necessarily being more of a vertical receiving threat. They're just kind of like a safety outlet for their quarterback, and that's being reflected in terms of yards per reception, kind of like how yards per carry might not necessarily be the greatest stat at the NFL level, but at the college level, it at least shows that you have some explosive ability to, average more than 6 or 7 yards per carry at the collegiate level. It's kind of similar thing here with the tight ends in terms of yards per reception to show that explosiveness downfield receiving type threat by these tight ends. And then, of course, I don't have an age marker system. Basically, age doesn't really necessarily seem to matter all that much. Although I will say it does seem like it's a red flag if you come in at or above the age of 24. So as long as you're younger than 24 years old, it doesn't really necessarily seem to matter like it does for the wide receivers or really for running backs. Tight ends, of course, all of these guys, you're going to find so few of these tight ends that actually translate to being like annual elite studs at the NFL level for fantasy. that, the age doesn't necessarily seem to really matter as long as you're under 24 years old. And that just didn't feel like it was worth giving them an extra point if you came in under 24, because that means that you could be a fourth or a fifth year guy, still come in under 24 years old, and you're totally fine. Didn't seem important to do. There is, of course, a draft capital marker on here. For running backs and wide receivers, my draft capital marker will hit if you are drafted in rounds 1 or 2. For tight ends, I extended that to rounds 3. So you basically get all of day 1 and all of day 2 to be drafted. If you're a day 3 pick, it's not to say that you won't be successful at the NFL level. It just seems like the hit rates are a lot higher if you are a first, second, or third round draft capital. The hit rate is really high for first rounds, and then it's pretty flat across the board for day 2. So as long as you're day 1 or day 2, you get a point for that in the marker system. If you're day 3, again, doesn't mean you won't be. It's just the hit rate seems to drop off pretty significantly once you get into day 3. And then, like I said, final age or final draft capital adjustment for the marker system. And that is how this whole entire thing is sorted by year. So there are 14 markers in totality. And actually, no tight end has ever hit on all 14. We have had some wide receivers hit on all 14 markers. We've had some running backs hit on all 12 of their markers. Malik Neighbors hit on all 14 last year. Bijan hit on all 12 of them 2 years ago. Like, it does happen at the running back and the wide receiver position, but it has not happened at the tight end position historically since I think this goes back to 2003 or 4. Some of them have gotten close. So we do have a couple tight ends that have hit on 13 of my 14 markers. The most recent being TJ Hawkinson. Eric Ebron did as well. And then Vernon Davis. So I feel pretty good about all of that. And I will say what I'm considering to be a hit at the tight end position is at least 2 seasons of tight end 1 production, which feels like a pretty low bar. Like, if you come into the NFL and you don't really matter for a year or 2, and then you have a tight end 11 season and then a tight end 8 season, then you never matter whatsoever, you are a hit. By tight end standards for me, I'm looking for multiple tight end 1 seasons. That is all you need to do, is just be a top 12 tight end twice in your career, and you are a hit. So, for example, Kyle Pitts is a hit in this system. He has 2 tight end 1 seasons as a rookie, and then he had one other one, I think 2 years ago. He was also a top 12 tight end. So Kyle Pitts is a hit, whether you like that or not. There's a lot of other tight ends in here that count as a hit. I think Cole Kmet was one. So it's a pretty low bar, but that just, I think, again, shows you just how hard it is to find guys that are going to matter annually and matter at an elite level, like Travis Kelce or Mark Andrews or George Kittle or Jimmy Graham or Rob Gronkowski. Those guys just don't come around all that often. A lot of these tight ends are very, very similar, and it's just, can we find some guys that are going to do that annually that are worth drafting in the first round, or can we find some of those guys that you can maybe plug and play as streamers, in the late second, third, or fourth round of your rookie drafts? Anyway, back to the marker system. These are the only 3 tight ends that hit on all 13. All 3 of them, actually, Ebron is not a hit. He's had 5 top 24 seasons, but only one of them have been top 12. So Ebron is not a hit, but Hawkinson is most definitely a hit. Vernon Davis was, of course, most definitely a hit too. Arguably the greatest tight end prospect of all time prior to Kyle Pitts coming in, and then, of course, prior to Brock Bowers coming in. But Davis, best tight end prospect of the 2000s and the 2010s. Coming out of college. There are a few other names that have hit on 12. So Trey McBride hit on 12 of them. Hunter Long did hit on 12. What could have been with Hunter Long? Tyler Eifert, Travis Kelce, Rob Gronkowski all get added into there. So love seeing the fact that Gronk is in there. Love seeing that Travis Kelce's in there. They all hit on 12 out of 14 markers. And then the people with 11, Ben Sinnott last year hit on 11 markers. Michael Mayer, you add in here, Jace Sternberger's in here, Evan Ingram, Gerald Everett, Ladarius Green, Dennis Pitta, Dallas Clark. So pretty solid list overall in terms of, if you hit on 11, 12, or 13 markers. And even if you go to 10, you extend it out to hitting on 10 out of 14, that introduces Greg Dulcich is in there. But Pitts is in there, Mark Andrews, Darren Waller, Jermaine Gresham. You get some more names whenever you open it up to 10 or more. And that is what the blue coloring on this marker system is if you hit on double-digit markers, I just want to know that, like, off the rip. I just want to see that instantaneously that you hit on 10. So that's why I have that blue coloration. So everybody that's colored in blue in this marker column have all hit at least double-digit markers. Not to say that you're definitely a hit, but it's the hit rate is pretty high, especially when you filter down. Like Caleb Wilson was a 7th round pick. Ladarius Green, Dennis Pitta were 4th round picks, but actually Pitta ended up being a hit. Some of these guys are 3rd rounders, but when you filter this down to just being like a 1st or 2nd round pick, it's a pretty good hit rate. What could have been with Jason Morrow? Maybe Michael Mayer ends up getting traded out of the Raiders system. That'd be fantastic because he's just stuck behind Brock Bowers. But it's a pretty solid list overall, especially whenever you filter it down to just being drafted on the first 2 rounds. And for those of you that are wondering, or might be sitting there and being like, well, you created a model system for rookie tight ends, and Brock Bowers isn't even one of your best tight ends on your list. Brock Bowers did not test last year. He did not do anything at the combine, didn't really do anything at his pro day either. So I am missing 3 markers for him in terms of 40 time, speed score, and burst score. I'm assuming that he would hit on all 3 of them because he's also a really good athlete. And if he hit on all 3 of them, he'd have 12 markers. So it's not my fault. It's Brock Bowers' fault that he did not test, or else he'd be up there with at least 12 markers hit, and he would be joining, McBride, Kelsey, Gronk. So one of the best tight ends in my marker system over the past 20 years as well, had he actually tested. The only 2 markers that he misses on are height and weight are the only 2, which was the only knock that anybody ever had on Brock Bowers, was that maybe he was a little small, maybe he was a little, undersized. That was the only negative that I ever saw last year in terms of, what Brock Bowers' profile even looked like. And those are the only 2 markers that he actually misses on out of the 14, assuming that he would have hit on all 3 of those other athleticism ones. So Bowers absolutely was the tight end 1 in last year's class by far, and was also one of the greatest prospects in my marker system had he actually tested. So it's not my fault. It's Brock Bowers' fault. But you can see, I feel like this creates a pretty good list. Like Bowers, Sinnott, Tip, Theo Johnson, Jerry Wiley, Jatavion Sanders. I feel like that's a pretty solid list, especially with Bowers and Sinnott at the top. You got for 2023, Kincaid, Mayer, Laporta, Musgrave were your top 4, with Schoonmaker as 5, Brenton Strange as 6, Darnell Washington as 7. I feel like that's a pretty good list. That was a pretty good class. McBride came out well ahead in 2022 with Dulcich as a 2. Isaiah Likely comes out as the tight end 4, so that's pretty interesting. Another guy that had he actually tested would have probably also been above double-digit markers as well. He's basically in the same situation as Brock Bowers. 2021, Kyle Pitts, Hunter Long, Pat Freiermuth. Feel like that's a pretty solid top 3. 2020, Cole Kmet, Devin Asiasi, Harrison Bryant. Albert O got buried a little bit by the 4th round draft capital, and he ended up being a bust. Hawkinson, Fant, there's your 1 and 2 for 2019, so I hit on that one. 2018, Hurst, Andrews, Gesicki, Goddard, there's your top 4 right there. The only reason that Hurst even comes out on top is because he got the 1st round draft capital. But I love seeing the fact that Andrews was 2nd overall still, even after the draft capital adjustment in this, ended up being the best tight end of this entire class, the best tight end that the Ravens picked over Hurst. Even though he was drafted 2 rounds later, he did hit on more markers than anybody. So had he just followed the raw markers, maybe that would have led you towards Mark Andrews in 2018 over Hayden Hurst. Hurst gets the nod in the after draft capital adjustment because of that 1st round draft capital. But then Gesicki and Goddard, also really worked out as well. 2017, Ingram, Njoku, Everett, OJ Howard, Johnny Smith. It's another pretty solid class. And I also love seeing that OJ Howard ended up still as the tight end 4 in my marker system after the draft capital adjustment. Even though he was the first tight end off the board in that class, he was still a worse prospect than Ingram, worse prospect than Njoku, worse prospect than Gerald Everett, who was drafted a round later, and barely better than Johnny Smith, who was drafted 2 rounds later. So that really shows you, I think, the power of the marker system is that it has this ability to, really hone in on some of these guys that might be overvalued or even undervalued depending on the NFL draft. You can see George Kittle is down here in this 2017 class. He's a tight end 9, but he does have a blue color in this PFF markers that we can, I guess, talk about right now. So the blue color for the PFF marker system, as I mentioned, I have the same one for wide receivers. I tried to see if there was anything, for wide receivers. I have a coloration based on if you greatly exceed my marker system in PFF markers, I want that to be noted. But if you greatly underperform in PFF compared to my markers, I also want that to be noted. And those are very positive and negative lists to be on. I tried to find that same thing for the tight end position. Couldn't really find it, but I did find that it seems to be that hitting on 7 out of these 10 PFF markers seems to be a pretty good hit rate as well. Basically, if you hit on 70% of them, there are pretty good things here. And you still have to be a top 200 draft pick, by the way. So it's the same thing that I have for running backs and for wide receivers. You have to be a top 200 guy. If you're a 6th or a 7th round pick, that really, really lowers the odds of you hitting, even though there is a 6th rounder in here. He's like the one really outlier name on this that's like so poorly in terms of my marker system. But he was drafted in the 6th round at 176th overall. So he hit my top 200. But if you're drafted outside the top 200, the hit rate for that is really, really low. But this is everybody that is drafted in the top 200 with 7 PFF markers hit. This is everybody. So you got Bowers in there. You got Eric All. So unfortunate that he just continues to get hurt. Kincaid, Laporta, McBride, likely. I mean, that's a really good list right there. Even if Kincaid's not necessarily producing like we want him, at least I feel like he's a value hit. Likely, I feel like has been a value hit. Kyle Pitts, absolutely a value hit, if not even a production hit after his rookie year. Hunter Long, Brevin Jordan, Harrison Bryant, Albert Equabenam, like these are all of the names that really like kind of are eyesores on this list. But they're all in there, and Caden Smith too. But then you get Andrews, Ingram, Njoku, Everett, Kittle out of 2017. And I love to see the fact that George Kittle is highlighted there, because obviously he is the best tight end from that 2017 class. So the fact that he's getting a shout out there in my marker system through the PFF markers, I think it's nice to see. And then Max Williams and Clive Walford. Max Williams was a hit. No, he wasn't. Never mind. Neither one of those two tight ends ever did anything, but it is what it is. So again, it's not a 100% hit rate, but I think it shows that at least we're trying to identify better probability and better odds of these tight ends hitting or actually becoming anything. Cause that's all it really feels like. This is that's all you need to do at the tight end position is just increase your odds of finding somebody, right? And then hopefully, you land into somebody that's phenomenal, like Mark Andrews, like George Kittle, like Travis Kelce, all that kind of stuff. So let's get into the 2025 class. I've gone on and on about the actual marker system. Let's talk about 2025. So the first thing that you guys might notice is that if you look at the top of this list, I can't filter it down. If you look at this top of the list, neither Tyler Warren or Colston Loveland are 1 or 2. And that is because neither one of them tested. Neither one of them tested at the NFL Combine. So I am missing on at least 3. Yeah, I'm missing 3 markers for both of them. So Loveland could be up at 11 markers hit. Tyler Warren could be up at 10 markers hit had they both actually tested at the Combine. We'll see if they do anything at their pro days. I think Michigan's is next week. Penn State's is at the end of the month, so we'll see if they actually test or anything at their pro days, see if I can fill in some of those numbers. But that's the only reason why they're not number 1 and number 2, at least in terms of my markers, is because they did not test. So they're still my tight end 1 and my tight end 2. I've actually, because of this, have shifted over more towards Colston Loveland as my rookie tight end 1 in this class than Tyler Warren. I think they're both in the same tier, but I think that with Colston Loveland, you're getting somebody that's 2 years younger. You're getting somebody with very equivalent like size, so to speak. Like, Loveland is 6'6", 248. Warren is 6'6", 256. So there's not really like much of a size difference between the two. Loveland produced earlier in college. Now, it's not necessarily Tyler Warren's fault. He was behind Pat Freiermuth and Theo Johnson and Brenton Strange when he came in. So there's been some really good tight ends over the past few years coming out of Penn State that prohibited Warren from producing. But Colston Loveland actually came into Michigan with and without good quarterback play with J.J. McCarthy and without J.J. McCarthy last year, and was still productive, even if the raw numbers don't necessarily show it. They do show it in terms of the actual team adjusted production, and his breakout age is at 19 for both thresholds, as opposed to 21 and 22 for Tyler Warren. So I do think that with Loveland, the leash is a little bit longer with him. And so I'm leaning towards him as more of my tight end one, although I think both of them are absolutely phenomenal and are in the same tier. I won't fault anybody for having Tyler Warren tight end one overall. Again, he's still the tight end one overall in my heart as a Penn Stater. But I think I lean towards Colston Loveland. And what I love more is that you generally see Colston Loveland going at least a pick, if not even a few picks, after Tyler Warren in your rookie draft. So a lot of people are probably going to gravitate towards Tyler Warren, even as early as like the 107, 108, 109. And if you can get Colston Loveland at the 111, 112, the 2.01 in your rookie drafts and have that little extra, just discount on Colston Loveland as opposed to Warren, that is really my main argument for why I think Loveland is a better rookie pick than Tyler Warren right now, is because he's a little bit cheaper, but I think also has slightly better odds of being a better fantasy tight end than Tyler Warren, and also has a 2-year, also got 2 years on Warren to do more, so to speak, I guess, before he gets like severely too old. So Colston Loveland, Tyler Warren, tight end 1 and tight end 2 in tier 1, both in the same tier. Love them both. Harold Fannin is still my tight end 3. Even after a bad combine, he actually hits on none of the athleticism markers, which is not a good sign. Because, he's small, he's 6'3", 241, ran a 4.71, which isn't necessarily a bad 40. It's just at 240 pounds. That's a sub 100 speed score. His burst score is really low with a 34-inch vertical, a sub 10-foot broad jump. So it's just not what you want to see from a tight end athletically, but he has all of the production metrics. He hits on 100% of the production metrics, and I think that is still what I'm gravitating towards. Now, I will admit, he is 100% behind the 8 ball. I went back and I looked, and this is actually the sheet where I have all of my hits. You can see that there's only 43 tight ends over the last 20 years that are considered hits that have multiple tight end 1 seasons. So that shows you just right there how bad the tight end position is for fantasy. But you can even see some of these names also really bad for fantasy football. The amount of these tight ends that hit on 0% of my athleticism markers is precisely 1 out of 43. It is Jordan Reed. That is the only one, which is the only comparison that was thrown around on Twitter. If you look at relative athletic score, RAS, that was the immediate comp that a lot of people went to was, Jordan Reed did it. Jordan Reed did it. And, Zach Ertz isn't necessarily the greatest athlete ever either. But he at least hit on, what did he hit on? Height. That's the only one that he hit on. Because he was sub 250 pounds, but he was 6'5". I'm looking for you to be at least 6'4". So Ertz isn't a great athlete either in terms of the 40 time compared to his weight, his vertical and his broad jump. Not a good athlete, but was just really, really good at finding these holes in the defense, caught everything, was a quarterback's best friend, got there through more of a PPR standpoint than an athleticism standpoint. And he's still doing it to this day. I mean, was a really good tight end last year for fantasy too with Jaden Daniels. So I that's where I lean more for Harold Fannin. Why he's still my tight end 3 in this class is because I just think for him to produce like he did, yeah, even still at Bowling Green, but for him to produce like he did, I still think that matters slightly more than the athleticism. The athleticism 100% matters for tight ends, and it is awful to see that he does not hit on any of these athleticism metrics, because that is really a very key point in being a sustainable fantasy tight end for years and years in the NFL, is to have that athleticism. And the fact that he doesn't hit on any of them, I do admit that I do recognize he's 100% behind the 8 ball. But I still just really lean in on that production, and that's why he's my tight end 3. He's not. There was, I think, coming into the combine, considered the big 3. It was Warren, Loveland, and Harold Fannin were the big 3 tight ends in this draft class. And I think after the combine, I think it's just Loveland and Warren at the top in tier 1. But I think Fannin is still a good tight end in tier 2, the only tight end in my tier 2 at tight end 3 overall. But he kind of fits as more of a mid to late second round rookie pick as opposed to a late first round rookie pick like Loveland and Tyler Warren. So I think there's still a place for Fannin. I still think that he can be good in the NFL, just maybe not as good as the other two. Then just kind of running through the rest of the names here, like Elijah Arroyo comes down in here. He kind of doesn't really have a whole lot of anything just because he's been hurt in college, didn't really have that much production to go with it. So he kind of got killed. He didn't test he didn't run a 40, didn't do vertical or broad jump. So I'm missing 3 markers for him too. If he hits on all 3 of those, he could be up here, right in this kind of range. But I still think he's interesting. He's my tight end 4 right now. Addison is actually the one name that interests me the most out of all of this. You'll see that he is at the top of this list, and that is still even without testing. So had he did do a vertical and a broad jump, so I do have a burst score for him. But he didn't run the 40, so I'm missing that, and then his speed score from that 40. So he could be at 11 markers, just like Loveland could also be at 11 markers. And I think that is very, very interesting. He hits on 100% of the production metrics. We'll see if he can hit on a couple of those athleticism ones too to bump him up into the 40 or 60% range. He also hits on 8 of these PFF markers. As I mentioned before, it seems like 7 is kind of the sweet spot of where you want to be above that. So he hits on all 8 of them, just like Fannin hits on all 10. Tyler Warren hits on all 10. Loveland is the only one of actually this whole entire group that doesn't hit on 7 PFF markers. So that is kind of interesting. But I am very interested in what Gadsden is going to do at the NFL draft. I do think that he could find his way into day 2 and be a guy that I am targeting in the 3rd rounds of my rookie drafts. Another name too that could be interesting is Terrence Ferguson. Doesn't hit on any of the production metrics, but if you know anything about Terrence Ferguson, or at least what he did at the combine, came in at 6'5", 247 pounds, ran a 4.63, and then had a 39-inch vertical, which was top in the class, and a 122 broad jump, which was third in the class. So he hits on basically all of the athleticism metrics, except he's not 250 pounds. I'm looking for them to be at least 250. He's 247, so he's right there. But he hits on basically all of the athleticism markers that I'm looking for with flying colors. He just doesn't have any of the production to back it up. So it's kind of interesting. So he's kind of like the reverse Harold Fannin, where he has all of the athleticism and none of the production, whereas Fannin has all of the production and none of the athleticism. But I do think the Ferguson, I haven't really seen his name touted out there a whole lot. I know that he's probably a late 3rd or even more of a 4th round rookie pick. So I am interested in him as one of those later round guys. There's some other interesting names in here. I like this Brent Kuth guy out of Utah. He's a 6-year guy, though. He's also 25 years old. I said very early on that it seems like you have to be at least under 24. So that might kill him. That's probably going to kill Joshua Simon as well. Another 6-year guy. So I just, there's not really a whole lot of other people that are necessarily catching my eye off the end. I've heard, like Gunnar Helm. I've seen some people say, oh, well, maybe Gunnar Helm does something. Maybe it's any of these other guys. Luke Lackey out of Iowa, another Iowa kid. I don't know. I feel like the rest of the tight end position, like you just don't necessarily really care. So for me, for 2025, it's Colson Loveland and Tyler Warren at the top. Harold Fannin is still very good tight end 3. And then you have very interesting profiles in Elijah Arroyo, Oronde Gadsden, and Terrence Ferguson to kind of basically be my top 6 for the 2025 rookie tight ends. So that's at least what we're looking at for this draft class. Of course, I had a post-combine update for the running backs and the wide receiver positions that I'll link right up in here at the end of the video, and you can go check that out if you missed that, running through the 2025 class again through my marker system for those positions. I still don't have a marker system for quarterbacks, but I think you guys are inspiring me to actually sit down and do that, just like I did for the tight ends over the past few days. So again, it might take me a few more days, so you might not get that until next week if I do decide to do a marker system for quarterbacks. If you want to see a marker system for quarterbacks, definitely let me know down in the comments. But that's at least what we're looking at for tight ends. Running backs and wide receivers are in the other video. So until we meet again, guys, appreciate you guys for watching this, for checking it out, for sharing the love for my marker system. If you guys want access to this and the other marker systems for running backs and wide receivers, I'm giving access to everybody that is in the Discord channel right now. So Discord channel link down in the description, free to join. So just come in, you can hang out, ask questions, answer other people's questions about trades or rookie drafts or all that kind of stuff. I'm in there, so you can come hang out too, and get access to all this stuff and mess around with it too in Google Sheets or Excel or anything like that. So Discord down in the description down below. Next video is right up there. Until then, guys, appreciate you guys watching. We'll catch you later. Peace.